record here. All right, I am now recording. All right, now I'm going to go to Lori and make her the host. Yes, but I'm still recording, so I'll have the recording. All right. Lori,
right. You guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
Lori, can you go to participants?
Let me see. Okay. Go to screen share or go to...
Yeah, go to, screen share.
Okay. This will stop other screen sharing.
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. Share screen.
Yep. There you go.
So this is me. All right. You guys see me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Here we go. Small world after all. Oh, I need to get it where I don't see the people here.
You can move the boxes with your mouse. You can move the boxes out of the way if you need to.
Okay, there we go. Sam Shruggins is the organizational development go-to person. He's the specialist that was hired by Myron Morton, who's the vice president of operations at Mercury Standard. Pettis Lemaster is the founder and CEO of Mercury Standard, which was founded about 40 years ago. Esther has been the chief financial officer for some time. She began with the company when it started 40 years ago. Sarah Scott is someone that Myron Morton brought with him when he started with Mercury Standard a few years ago. She's the secretary to the senior management team, so she's an outsider. The executive team members are local people from the community that work their way up at Mercury Standard Corporation. The company has about 500 employees, which is the second largest employer in the small town of Brewer. Has beautiful grounds and unattractive buildings. Overall, the town is considered to be frozen in time. It's uninviting. The people consider it to be a blue-collar town when really it's a white-collar town. And it's a stereotypical small town with a rumor mill, which is part of the theme of the whole case study. Sam Shruggins has been to Brewer on many occasions for other consulting jobs, so he knows the feel of the town. He, with his company, is accustomed to working with small to medium-sized companies. It's not anything unusual for him. With this particular company, he's had 2 on-site visits. But during the first visit, He was told that the goal was to get the executive team aligned with the goals and performing at higher level. Not anything specific, that's what was said in the case study. So how do you do that? What does that mean? What's the definition of that? Shruggins met with the team together and then individually. And then on the second meeting, he went over what he learned from the individual meetings, and then he went over the results from the assessment measure. Pettis Lemaster, the CEO, is considered a local hero for a variety of reasons. One, because there's good wages and good benefits at Mercury Standard. The other thing is he's really considered to be loyal to the people of the community. There were several offers to buy the plant, which he refused. He has prostate cancer and is absentee due to his treatment, which leads to another problem as who he left in charge, who he left as the lead role. Myron Morton is an outsider, which is a theme and a key to this thing since it is a small town. He's been with Mercury Standard for 4 years. He was left in charge by Lemaster during his cancer treatments. Morton's concerned with the big picture, such as strategies for growth, and he's the one who called in the organizational development. He does not see himself there long term. One of the things early on in the case study, it talked about how he has some kids in high school. His wife said when we get out of high school, so they don't see themselves there long term. And I think that's key to part of this is you're an outsider, but you're a short termer as well. So the people probably have a sense of that. Esther Michelson, upset about Morton's lead role during the absentee of the CEO. She's been the chief financial officer and has been with the company for 40 years. The photos of the board members was mentioned in the case study that they're all white men over 60. In psychology, we always talk about the 4 characteristics of the people that have developed everything. The theory, the IQ tests are old, white, rich men. So when they mentioned all white men over 60, was there a possible gender bias in picking Myron over Esther? Maybe, maybe not. Because she was there 40 years, was she given an explanation of why Morton was picked? If she was there 5 years, I don't think she needs an explanation. But because she's been there so long since the beginning and is in that role of CFO, was she part of that decision? And in a small town, there are no secrets. So next we've got Bruce. You want to go ahead?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. The purpose of the specialist, Morton, of course, as Lori said, been with the organization for about 4 years and had taken on some duties of the CEO. He noticed that there were some gaps in the organization, so he contacted Shruggins, who was a specialist. The people in the organization seemed complacent and not motivated to change and move forward. So he needed Shruggins to assist him in team development. He knew Shruggins specialized in creating effective teams and barriers to working together effectively. And he also needed Shruggins to help generate meaningful discussions for growing the business or talking about new marketing efforts. Okay, next slide. Although Mercury had a good representation or good reputation in the community with good benefits and wages, Morton's senior management team and his board members were not concerned. They were actually concerned that he was the right person to lead this organization. Things that he noticed, the team were pleasant to one another on the outside. They generally avoided contact, and then they viewed by Morton as ineffective in dealing with real issues. And then also the team were having meetings filled with trivial issues and hour-long discussions. They were also having difficulty with discussion strategies in the business as well. Okay, next slide. And so Morton had some internal issues he had to battle with before trying to lead this organization. Was he the right person on the bus, or did he have the right team on the bus to lead this organization? So some of the organizational concerns where Morton had worked, of course, at Mercury for only 4 years and was promoted to run the executive committee meetings and continue to oversee the operations in the 3rd year after the CEO, of course, has suffered prostate cancer. And then also there was little communication that was said directly to Morton about the direction of the interim arrangement. He had no idea the direction that the board wanted him to go in. And then Morton's CFO, of course, Mickelson, a longtime employee, was not happy with the appointment. And then most of the senior management team were locals who had worked their way up in the company. And there were only 3 of the 7 members in the organization that had college degrees, including Morton, of course.
David?
Thank you. So in addressing the issue of should Mr. Shruggins have used the assessment test in the manner he used it, our answer to that was no, that the assessment results were discussed as a group without regard to privacy, and therefore that caused a media leak, and that caused an issue in the small town with the newspaper. He should have started his meetings discussing the culture and the goals to improve the business, to form relationships as the consultant, and to open the lines of communication with the executive team to get their feedback of where they feel the organization is, and helping him assist in the goals and directions of providing assistance as the consultant. The assessment that he used was designed for personal selection, and personnel selection is not important. It was our opinion in a rural environment with few potential candidates select for executive positions. You know, if there was a question of who's going to move into positions, if there's any transition, a small town with little candidates is not the place to be looking to make that move. Was Mr. Scruggins qualified to use the assessments? Well, although he was not trained as a psychologist, he did attend a course by the publisher, and on that basis he was allowed to purchase the measure, is what it described in our article. But purchasing the measure is not the same as being allowed to conduct testing. So as you referred to, Dr. Lamb, this one's not exactly clear-cut, black and white. So I tried to look at it from the standpoint of let's garner some more evidence, and found that the American Psychological Association of Practice Organization, they had an issue related to who's able to conduct testing, and they addressed that at a conference in the February 2006 APA Practice State Leadership Conference. When they did so, that group indicated that interviewing, observation of behavior, reviewing educational health and psychological records were all important, but a professional conducting a psychological assessment must complete the appropriate training, acquire appropriate credentials, adhere to professional ethical guidelines, and possess a high degree of judgment and scientific knowledge for doing so. And that was not the case with Mr. Scruggins here. So we looked at what steps could be used to minimize the misuse of the test. We said that that Mr. Scruggins can either gain the appropriate education and training, or he can contact a subcontractor that would serve as an expert and outsource that part of his business as a consultant, since he does not currently possess the proper level and training to be doing so. And then we looked at the responsibility of Mr. Scruggins and Mr. Morton once the situation blew up. Of course, it went to the newspaper and was a scandal in the small town with the assessment providing descriptions that were not positive to the leadership team. So we looked at that, and we said that Mr. Scruggins and Mr. Morton, they did have a responsibility to minimize the effect of the newspaper article once it was released to the public. First, there should have been a corporate crisis plan to handle this issue like this one. In other words, a company liaison should have already been established for situations such as this. In other words, media blow-ups. And that Mr. Scruggins and Mercury, Mr. Morton, could respond with either a written response in the newspaper as an editorial to the online webpage for the article, because it did mention there was a link for comments. Or they can look to place a response in their internet homepages and send an email internally to all employees describing the situation. In other words, trying to communicate and alleviate this. But in terms of the message with that, we looked at it from the standpoint the message needs to be positive and focus on the corporate improvement that's taken place, the reason for the consultant in the first place, to bring about efficiencies and help with the goals of the organization. And that message needs to include information about Mr. Scruggins, his consulting history, his reputation for success, and things of such as years and number of service and how he's been beneficial to clients. In other words, trying to spin it on a positive note as opposed to what took place as the smear campaign in the newspaper. And then I just listed here at the very end of it the reference source of where I got about that PowerPoint reference about who can conduct testing.
And I think there are two things here. One is the inappropriate use of the testing, but then the overall opinion of people that employment-based personality tests are valid and reliable. There's no scientific proof or evidence that the employment-based personality tests determine any type of job performance. So he said he was going to do this for team building, to get people talking, to put them at ease, which actually the opposite happened. But the big picture is we've got, and I put some of this in my reflection, we've got big companies that are charge a fee for someone to do some sort of testing in human resources, and they use words like scientific and advancement and research, and we have experts, when the bottom line is I have an assignment similar to an employment-based thing in my class, 7,000, I think it was over 7,000 research articles reviewed, and at the end of it, no evidence that these tests determine anything to do with job performance. But we believe they do, and I think it's back to what Dr. Lamb always says, which is that usual customary practice. This is what people do, and I think human resources want something to be objective. So here's a test that we can do. It's going to make our situation less subjective, but no evidence. Anything else, guys?
Wow, y'all, great job. Y'all hit all of the points that I have on my list. I've been checking them off. A great job. Very good. Y'all are learning something from somebody. It's not me. I don't know who's working with y'all, but y'all are learning something from somebody. I am impressed. Very good. Very good. Questions? All right. Who's going to be next? Lori, if you will move the host to that person.
Okay. Stop share screen with.
And then go to participants and make Brandon the host. And then Brandon will go to share screen, and once he's the host. Wow, that was really good.
I don't know what I'm doing.
All right. If you will go to participants, and there'll be a little more sign next to Brandon's name. There we go. Brandon has started. There we go. Excellent.
All right. Oh, here we go.
There we go. Excellent.
All right. And let me move this around. Trying to get some things on my screen. Here we go. All right, facts of the case. You have, of course, Mercury Standards, the corporation, 3 miles outside of Brewer, and they definitely have an identity crisis, determining whether or not they're going to be a blue collar, white collar community. They're adjacent to a golf course, and the facility is old, and they have unattractive buildings. However, the landscape is immaculate, even has trails for the community to utilize during spring and winter. It's the second largest employer in the city with 500 employees. Most employees have risen through the ranks and over the years. They all have it's an all-white board member, and most of them have 40 years of service. And you typically see that in small communities. They're very dedicated to those businesses that stay within their community. You also have Sam Shuggins, who's going to be the consultant, well known in the area of organizational development. Typically works with primarily small to medium companies in rural parts of the state. We thought that this probably would have been a great opportunity as he's familiar with rural areas. Developed a favorite approach that usually worked pretty well for most of the problems he has addressed in other organizations. Then he also will incorporate some type of testing, typically for part of the assessment phase, in the initial consultation with the company. Have Myron Morton. He's been employed 4 years with the company, still considered a newcomer and an outsider by local standards within the organization. Came from the state's second largest city. He took the job because it was considered a promotion from where he was, but then the family dynamics that led to the decision to move to a smaller city that he discussed with his wife, taking into consideration the needs of kids, but he still preferred the larger city environment. He's vice president of operations, runs the executive committee meetings in the absence of the CEO, whom we'll discuss in a moment. And then he also heard Shruggins speak at one of the Brewer Rotary Club meetings, which is why he had invited Mr. Shruggins to come in the first place. Mr. Pettis Lemaster, he's the CEO of Mercury Standard Corporation, and he also suffered recurrence of prostate cancer. So that's increased absence from the company, which led to him having Morton to take his place in his absence. Continues to work with the board, and he's known by the board members for more than 40 years. He's considered a local hero because he continued to keep the company local instead of allowing others to buy out. He wants the company to be the legacy and inheritance for the family. Then you have Sarah Scott. She's the secretary to the senior management team, employee of Morton's at previous company, and we consider her to be the gossip queen. Kind of kept all that information going around. Esther Michelson, chief financial officer, and she's upset that Morton was promoted over her, considering she's been there for so many years, over 40 years with the company since its founding, and felt that I should be rewarded as being a loyal member. I've worked my way up. I've shown my dedication. Then you just have a slew of other locals in the newspaper, and then several other people within the community as they're the rumor mill and lending that ear to the gossiping queen, and just how that information transpires throughout the case.
Okay, so we like to take the learning objectives from the case study to kind of help us analyze it. So the first objective was to address when it is appropriate to use an individual assessment tool as part of organizational development. So before you can decide what type of assessment to use, we think you have to explore the needs of the organization first. What do they need? Certain tools may not be appropriate or useful for every organization, so you have to determine what their needs are first. And then decide what type of assessment tool is going to give you the most information to assist the client. So beginning with the end in mind, what will give you the most information? So the second objective was to understand issues that may come up when doing organizational development in a small rural community. So in a small community, everybody knows everybody. They go to church together. They shop at the same grocery store. So information spreads easy and fast. Smaller communities may be resistant to change because they've always done it that way. Why change when it's always worked? People are very loyal to their companies that remain in their community. And then these people usually have very conservative views. And they believe they know what's best. Okay. All right. The third learning objective was how to deal with the aftermath when something goes wrong. First, you have to deal with the source of the problem. So was the problem the tool? Was it the people? Was it what information was leaked? accept responsibility of the situation and start working on a resolution immediately. Don't let things get out of hand. Don't let things build up. We thought it may be a good idea to make a written statement to the media and acknowledge the facts. Don't sweep things under the rug. Make sure you say, the assessment was done individually and the information was not shared by the company or by the consultant. So make sure that you're just sticking to the facts. Okay, so the objectives of the consultancy was to assess the team and focus on how to become more aligned. That was one of Morton's goals. Determine how to make the team perform at a higher level. He wants them to work harder and achieve more. Also, he wanted help with a strategy for growing the business. Not too sure that he knows how to even start that. I don't think he knows how to grow the business. And then strategies to effectively deal with the real issues. So when they meet, they talk a lot about, for example, what days they should take off versus they should be talking about how to grow their business. So maybe a different forum for the day off type issues and then a real business meeting for the business type issues. And that will help maybe the conflict that they may see. They're not very open to conflict. They avoid it as much as they can.
So the assessment tool that was used, you have the 5-factor measure for normal personality. Struggins had used this frequently in the past. He considered it to be a harmless measure and a good icebreaker and tension reliever. He had no formal training in this, attended the course, and he just followed the test from the publisher. It was a self-scored assessment and analysis discussed in an open forum or a lecture style. So the data, the assessment tool was given to each employee. It was a short form of 5-factor measure of normal personality, which was commonly used in personnel selection. The participants self-scored the measure. There was really no data collected from the measure, no observations, no interviews or anything else that Morton collected to actually get to know the individuals or what the company needed. And so our recommendations for Mercury, determine the main problem and the desired outcome of the consultancy, discuss the goals and objectives with the consultant before introducing to being introduced to the employees, reassess the negative publicity and determine the next course of action for addressing it. And then recommendations for the consultant. Spend more time discussing the outcomes with management before meeting the team. Interact with employees in their workplace. Observe employees, conduct individual interviews. Do assessment, measure, and discuss individually. Do not have someone on the business team taking notes. More training on how to use or the purpose of the assessment being used. Again, just mentioned that Struggins attended the course, didn't really have any formal training in how to use the measure. Make sure the assessment being used is appropriate to the situation or the organization. And Struggins should not have used the equality assessment as he was not qualified, and he should have definitely obtained additional training. And then further understanding of the client's need and culture of the organization is warranted. Explanation of confidentiality measures to employees should be administered prior to using the assessment.
That's all.
I love that one. Excellent, excellent. I love the recommendations for the consultant because that kind of bullets it all. All right. Let's see. All right. Here, you folks have done an excellent, excellent job. So let's kind of review some things here, some actual learning points, hopefully today. Why did he hire Morton and then put him in charge when he went out on medical leave? Why did he hire this outside man?
I think it's beneficial that an outsider to come in to look at the organization. You've had the same people there for over 40 years, so you're going to do the same things, and they may need a new direction to elevate them to higher performance and higher yields in whatever it is that they do, because I don't think they establish or stated what it is this company makes or their product.
Anybody else? That's a good point.
I'm wondering if he is doing this because he sees he's on his way out. It doesn't talk about how he's done anything like this in the past. It sounds like everything's been pretty local. Now he's sick. Does he see himself as exiting the company and he wants it to go in a different direction? Or he might be looking at selling, who knows? But it's unusual to pull someone in from the outside and have them in charge when that's not been what he's done in the past, since he is considered the local hero.
Yeah, I feel like he realizes his own mortality. I think that's the purpose of telling you that he's out, and it sounds serious. I also feel like he understands that if the company continues in the same way, that it will go out of business. He was willing to take financial risk and financial hit to keep the company intact and not let it get taken over. But I think he realizes that to be competitive in the market, that things have to change. It has to change from the type of organization it is. Let's go back to kind of Dale's list of, what kind of organization this is. Is this an organization based on excellence, customer service, clients experience, or is it a patronage organization providing jobs and being a community agency? Which of those four is this?
Patronage.
It's a patronage organization.
Yeah.
It's a patronage organization. It's local. They hire people locally. Have they really ever been concerned with output or growth or outcomes or any of those kinds of those? No. But Mr. LeMaster understands that going forward without him, if they don't get into that realm and move away from being a patronage organization, that they'll go out of business. Times change. The next group that takes this thing over is not going to be willing to operate at a loss or fend off outside takers, and lose their personal wealth or the money, or they're not going to be willing to do that. And so that's why I think this, that Morton was hired and put in charge.
I think
why did he not put the CFO in charge? Why did he bring in a new person and then put that person in charge and not put the old CFO in charge? Why do you think he did that? I'm putting David on the spot here.
The CFO is an insider, and she's been with the company for a number of years. And I kind of look at it, and I've worked in different types of organizations, kind of one of those kissing cousins kind of organizations. It's difficult to change what your cousin might otherwise know. They know the person intimately. They know their work style. They know their successes or failures as a leader, and they may not be willing to go along with that person. And it's much more difficult to get somebody, I think, on the inside to do so as opposed to bring somebody independently from the outside.
It is. That's exactly right. That's the point there. I've had students, ask, why they bring this outside guy in? Because that's the only way to affect change. We look at the change process, the unfreezing, removing, and refreezing. That's awfully difficult from somebody who's part of that establishment. It's hard for them to do, and that's why he brought him in. And this person was an outsider. He'd been there 4 years. People say he's still an outsider after 4 years. My exemplar is from here in the town of Boiling Springs. I worked with a man 30-something years ago in a neighboring county. He lived here. His name was Jerry Bryson. And he lives here in Boiling Springs. And he decided to run for the town board here in Bowling Springs. And he said, I'm running as the outside candidate. And I said, Jerry, how long have you lived in Bowling Springs? Well, he said, I've only lived there for 29 years. So I'm still the outside candidate. You can't make that up. It's absolutely the truth. I saw a sign out here on the marquee out at the bank right here at the college today that said, Happy Birthday, Jerry, at Bryson. And I thought about Jerry then. He's lived here now. Because, gosh, that was I was at New Hope 31 years ago. So he's lived here now for 60 years. So he's finally, after 60 years, he's now made it to be an insider here after 60 years. 29 wasn't enough. So, yes, even after 4 years. So the question is you brought this person in, they've been here 4 years. Are they really still an outsider? Yes, they're still really an outsider.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes.
I think another factor, too, is that he might have been, he had the degree or the knowledge to move the company forward, since there were only 7 people, 3 of the 7 people who had degrees.
That's a great point, Brandon. I mean, he didn't, I'm sure Mr. LeMaster looked around and said, I don't have anybody with the skills to do this. I'm going to have to bring somebody in. And so going back to Lori and Jessica's point, usual customary practices, I mean, that's what people operate under in organizations. We've always done it this way. So it's hard to get somebody to change that. You won't change, you have to bring a new person in. And the people inside won't ever accept that because they think everything's going to always be fine. Because we've always been in business, we'll always be in business. No, there's no guarantee. Do you feel like that the people other than Morton really understood the purpose of the organization? That you have to make money to stay in business? Do you think they actually understood that, or they were stuck in that patronage organization mode? I think they were stuck in that patronage organization mode. And the master understood that, realized that if he turned it over to them, they'd just run it in the ground. It wouldn't be long after his passing that it would be gone. That the only way for it to survive would be to bring somebody in from the outside. Now, Morton, why did Morton hire Shruggins? Why did Morton, who was the change agent, why did he hire Shruggins? Because he didn't feel like he had the skills, that he was going to bring in a professional to help him with this change process. The stated objectives were to work on team effectiveness, grow the company, and specifically to get them out of conflict avoidance. I think whoever made that point, and I'm sorry I didn't write that down, but yes, those were the 3 things that he was trying to combat by bringing in. He wanted to stop them from doing conflict avoidance. They just talked about vacation days. He wanted to grow the company, and he wanted a more effective team to do that. So he brought in Shruggins to do those things. All right. So he understood it was a patronage organization. He understood that he was a change agent. I've got to bring in somebody to help me now. So up to this point, everything, he understands what he's doing. Everything's good. He has confidence in Shruggins. He has a track record, those kinds of things. Now let's move over to Shruggins. Made an excellent point. Qualitative data, in terms of gathering data, you can gather qualitative or quantitative. This is a plug for my 738 class, by the way. That's what you're going to learn in 738, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative data is interviews, observations, document review, and artifacts. Those are the stock and trade of qualitative data collection. All right. So now, Adrian Adrian was one of my doctoral students recently. and she did a qualitative study. And we had some problems because of her. We have an institutional review board here, as all colleges do, which basically makes sure that you follow the rules correctly in your methodology. And there was, by the time it got to me, there had been a problem, and that's why they always come to me. I'm the methodologist. She had promised participants in her study anonymity, but was going to do focus groups. Think about that one for a minute. And that's what happened in this case. They did focus groups, basically. But the promise was anonymity. Can you have anonymity if you're doing focus groups? That would be no. You have to do individual interviews if you're going to promise anonymity. Now, you can do confidentiality with focus groups, but what's the chances of that happening in a patronage organization? In a patronage organization, what are the chances of confidentiality if you use focus groups? That would be none as well. Yeah. Not going to happen. So, the consultant did not use good technique, as it was just pointed out in both presentations. The consultant didn't understand qualitative data gathering, didn't understand the setting, and made a really bad error there. If you want to use some type of instrumentation, it's got to be individual interviews, and it's not going to be even then. It's only going to be confidential. People are going to know who gave the interviews, but they may not know the specific information that came from the person. But with the instrumentation that this person selected, you would do interviews rather than focus groups. Number one. Number two, as you pointed out, this person was not qualified to use the instrument. That speaks again to 738 coming up. Validity and reliability. Validity is does the instrument measure what it's supposed to, and reliable is did you administer it in a way that gets the results intended. This person did not. The test might have been valid itself, but there was reliability issues because you had an untrained person using the instrument, which rules it both unreliable and not valid. This past week I sat in on, again, when there's always a problem, we bring in the methodologist, sit in on dissertation proposals and final defenses. And so I sat in on a proposal this week where there was an argument between committee members. It wasn't ugly, but there was a disagreement on whether or not the actual candidate should be allowed to conduct interviews with colleagues. And the answer, of course, is no. If you are the researcher and there's interviews to be done and it's at your place of work or with your colleagues, you should hire an outside professional to do interviews. Now, supposedly this person was the outside professional, but was not actually qualified to use this instrumentation. So, Shruggins, Morton did the right thing. He hired an outside, supposedly expert. The problem was the expert was not expert in the methodology that he had chosen, both in its application and its actual implementation. He was expert at neither. And so that speaks to us as consultancy people. We need to be expert. And if we aren't expert, as David pointed out, we need to hire somebody who is expert in the process of using that instrumentation. So that was
Dr. Lamb.
That was a bad one. Yes, Bruce.
Just a question. I guess just some advice, really. In our organization, we currently have an interim president. And so we're in the process of finding a president. And basically what the process that they've established is from our interim and the board is they sent out a survey, and they surveyed the entire institution and asked questions of what we were looking for in a president. And from my understanding, some of the data or some of the responses from the data basically said we need to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
We have some inside candidates that are applying, and basically when they selected the search team, they done the same thing as far as nominations. They sent out a survey and said, do you nominate this person, a staff person, a faculty person? And so we had to vote for a staff, we had to vote for a faculty. So we basically have inside people on the committee, which we may have the possibility of 2 inside candidates running for the position. What advice would you give our organization in this process?
I would hire a consultant, and I'm sure they have.
They have not.
There's your problem.
No, they have not hired a consultant.
Man. See, I would have hired a consultant to make the process, at least on the surface. Hopefully, it was a legitimate process that you followed the steps, and it wouldn't be seen as an inside job. Sometimes you hire the consultant to give you cover, so that people can't say, well, it was an inside job. First thing I would recommend for your organization is to hire an outside consulting firm to do these things, and they may do the same things that the folks inside have done, but it's the appearance of impropriety that you don't want. And so that's why, you're doing a consultancy project here, and you're training as consultants, because you're supposed to do it the right way. I'm supposed to teach you the ethical way, or we're supposed to teach you the ethical way to do these things. If you're going to use an instrument, you better be trained in that instrument. You should know the process of, when I can use a focus group, when I have to do interviews. You're supposed to learn that in 738. You're supposed to be a professional in this. What happens is even though folks inside the organization may be professional and know this stuff, the appearance is, the optics are still bad. Can't get away from that. And even though it might be a good decision or the right decision, you still can't get away from the optics of the situation, because the public relations and the media is watching, and they're always going to be looking for stories and conspiracy theories and those kinds of things.
Yeah, small town. Yeah,
small town. I mean, there should have been a consulting firm hired to do this, and you didn't have to hire, somebody that was going to cost $1 million. You could have come over here to the college, or to some other. You could have went to Charlotte and got a professional firm. You could come over here to the college and work with one of the departments here on campus. To bring in people from outside your organization that have some expertise in this.
Wow.
And so how you start many times is how you finish. That's a bad start. And everything is kind of tainted from that. That fruit from that fruit from that tree is always going to be tainted. You can't get around that. And that, and that brings me to kind of my summary here, and you folks hit upon this. Public perception. Need a crisis plan. You need PR people. You have to do damage control. And I tell people all the time, the best way to get out of the swamp is not to get in the swamp to begin with. Don't make those bad mistakes up front. Don't not hire a consultancy firm. Don't hire a consultant that uses inappropriate technique and causes data leaks and bad PR and all those kinds of things, and basically harms people. I mean, the whole idea of an institutional review board at a college is to make sure that there's no harm to the participants. That's first and foremost as a researcher, do no harm. And that's what's happened here. If you don't hire a consulting firm and you start, I mean, the person that gets hired at your college, Bruce, is going to be tainted from the very beginning. It's going to harm that person, although they may be the right person. But because the process is seen as not professional and not above board, that person's going to start with a cloud over their head to begin with. And that's why you should hire a consulting firm when you're doing CEO searches or searches for critical positions. We had I worked in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools for a long time in the central office, and we would take the hit on whatever bad PR that we had for that day. Hopefully, if it didn't happen too early, we would miss the morning news and we'd be on the lunchtime news. Of course, we'd be on all the news at 4, 5, and 6, and then again at 11 o'clock. And so we would kind of take 3. But now, if it started up the next morning again, we were in trouble. And we knew that it perpetuates itself. And bad things happen, but you got to have a crisis plan in place. You got to have somebody to get out in front of it and speak to it. You got to have that PR staff that can get out and get in front of things so that you don't become the news every day. You take the beating on the day that it happens, but you can't keep on taking the beating and sustain that as an organization, whether you're public or private, profit or nonprofit, doesn't matter. You can't take that public relations hit day after day after day. So yes, you do need a crisis plan and you need a PR team. If it does happen to you, you need those things. Now you say, well, Dale, what's that got to do with consultancy? The consultant has to have a crisis plan as well, and PR skills as well. When things, when Gaston College says we've hired Bruce as our consultant, and Bruce then has to be able to speak to the media when there are questions, or have somebody in his firm speak to the media. So it's not just, the point here is it's not just companies that need crisis plans and PR management. Consultants also need those as well. And that goes back to your credentials. And people are going to question, well, why, are you qualified to do this? What are your qualifications? And it can't just be, I stayed at the Holiday Inn last night and that makes me an expert in methodology. No, it doesn't. Just having attended a seminar does not make you a consultant. And as pointed out, that does not make you that does not make you qualified to be giving out this instrument or using this instrument. You've clearly used it inappropriately, which ruins its validity and its reliability. So this one is not as clear cut as the others. There's not an answer. This is an amalgam of problems. Patronage organization probably not doing as well financially as it needs to. The CEO is dying. He realizes that without him there to hold it together, it's going to fall apart. He brings in somebody from the outside. He puts them in charge because he doesn't believe the people inside can unfreeze, move, and refreeze, can lead the change process to a customer service organization rather than a patronage community agency. And so he brings a person in. That person in good faith hires a consultant. However, the consultant does not have the skill required, does not have the knowledge and skill required, and it goes bad quickly due to bad methodology. And then they're in crisis mode. My suspicion is they've never had a crisis plan, taking a PR beating that they'll never recover from, or more importantly, that Morton never recover from. Druggins probably won't recover from it either in terms of his consultancy business, but Morton's probably going to be out. The board's probably going to move him out now. That's probably going to be, as we used to say in MS, if it doesn't stop in a day or two, there must be blood. Somebody has to go home. That's the only thing that the media that's the only thing that will sate the media's appetite, is that somebody has to go home. In this case, it's probably going to be Morton. In his case, maybe more due diligence in getting the right consultant. Maybe this person was just local and handy, or maybe he was cheap for whatever reason, but he picked badly. And the consultant's probably going to be out of business after this as well. And it's all due to methodology. All these other things, are part and parcel of the actual case itself. But the part here that kind of deviates in the part for the learning, the takeaway from us is if you're going to be a consultant, you better know your business. You better understand methodology, instrumentation. You better understand qualitative data collection. All those things are important. This is kind of the worst case scenario. There's a lot of different factors, but in the end, we can kind of boil it down to poor performance and professionalism on the part of the consultant. Is kind of where I put this. But as I told you in the begin with, this one is not as clear cut. There's a lot more factors. This is kind of my opinion kind of thing. But I think I could support my argument that this is just the consultant did not use proper technique, and both of y'all picked up on that very quickly. But this one kind of encapsulates a lot of the themes that I've been in a rant about all semester, pointing to this one. This is kind of what happens. This case is more the norm than the exception, unfortunately, in the consultant business. These are the kinds of things that you will get into in consultancy. Questions, issues, statements. Did you like this one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you kind of had to put everything to kind of that we've learned so far, that you've learned so far. Y'all have learned more than me, and that's always a good thing. Had to kind of put everything together on this one and come up, because this one didn't lead you to obvious answers, is my point. The others kind of led you to obvious answers. This one didn't lead you to an obvious answer. You had to kind of put 2 and 2 together and come up with 4 on this one, and that's why I like this one the best. It's not as clear cut. It's not just this is the obvious answer kind of thing on this one. You had to kind of put all the things that we've been working on all semester together to come up with the right answers on this one. And you all, and both groups did an excellent job. I especially like the recommendations for the consultant on the last presentation. I always like bulleted lists. I like takeaways, going forward, kind of things. Things for us to know. I like that kind of stuff. We were working on a collaborative plan yesterday, and it was a big circle with all these arrows and all that stuff. And I said, I don't understand at all what you're doing. Why don't you just make a list? Wouldn't that be easier for folks to understand? And all the curriculum people looked at me like I was a Neanderthal, and I was like, well, because I am. I'm guilty of that. But, in the end, sometimes you just need a list and you need clarity. I understand all these PERT charts and models, and a lot of people learn that way. But the point of that is you need both. When you're working in organizations, the charts and the graphs and the circles and all of those kinds of things. Yes, some people understand better with that, but then there's still a lot of us, maybe less modern type people, who a list is more appropriate for us. And so I do like the list. I think that's helpful for me. And so I'm a list maker anyway, so that's good. Know your audience. When you're a consultant, you're doing presentation, know your audience. And my suggestion is always that you do both. You have the people that you're working with that are good at making the circles and those kind of theoretical models. Have them do their part. But also in the end, you always kind of come back to the old quantitative people who make a list, because you're trying to hit both audiences. And, we don't care how people learn, just that they learn when we're working in the consultancy. We have to make sure that when we do data presentations or when we do presentations in consultancy, that we hit both audiences. And there are 2 distinct audiences when you're making the presentation. Those are the theoretical people, the people that I call the curriculum people, which are the smart people. And then you have people like me who are the operations people, who are just about making it work, getting it done, making lists, the actual work of the organization. You have those people as well. And you have to be able to hit both of those groups when you're doing consultancy, because in a room you're going to have, it may not be half and half. In education agencies, it's about 95-5. It's about 95% creative curriculum people and about 5% operations people. That's just kind of but in a manufacturing environment, it's probably going to be exactly the other way around. So you need to know your audience, but you need to have both of those in your toolkit, how to present data and information both ways. So that's just kind of a editorial at the end. Anything else before we sign off for today? I'm very proud of the progress that you're making in spite of me. Y'all are doing a great job. You're learning, you're reading, you're bringing in outside resources. You understand that this is about developing skills and tools for your toolbox. And I'm glad that you have picked up on that and are doing more than just the minimum. And I'm appreciative of that. All right. So again, let me go back to new share and I'll wrap this thing up. Again, this was our case study 3 presentation for November 4th. Next weekend, you'll be at home doing discussion board 5, and I do enjoy reading your discussion boards. I look forward to those. Make sure that you put in your Dropbox your presentation today and your reflection from today. Get those in there sometime this week, and then you have your discussion board. I will see you again on Saturday, November the 18th. I'll have breakfast. Any suggestions for change in breakfast or something different? We'll do lunch somewhere. Do we want to do something special on Sunday for dinner or lunch or just what we've been doing, or walk up to the cafeteria? If you have suggestions, don't have them now, email them to me, because that'll be our last time together, November 18th and 19th, and then you'll have the holiday weekend off for Thanksgiving. And then we'll be back together on the Zoom on Saturday, December the 2nd at 9 o'clock. Then you'll have your last discussion board due, and as we said earlier, all work will be due by December 14th. If you have suggestions that you'd like to share with me privately, just email them to me or call me for how we can get better or do more or learn more or something that I'm missing with you. I appreciate those because I want you to get as much out of this. I want you to get your money's worth. I want you to get something out of this. So if I need to do something different or more or better, you just let me know. It will not insult me. All right. We did well today. We're done at 10:08. So have a good rest of the day and good rest of the weekend. And I will see you face to face on Saturday, November 18th. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.